In 2016, we built an unbeatable operation that changed history. Now, we unveil our next breakthrough. The exclusive Trump 2020 app. This isn't just an app. This is your source for real news, not fake news. Straight from the campaign and the president himself. This is your direct line to give input on key campaign issues. Your portal to register voters. Host MAGA meetups. Your scheduler. Your application on becoming a Trump team leader. Join millions and get a front row seat to our virtual events. Watch Team Trump every night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Earn points, get rewarded. Get the presidential photo. Oh, and did we mention it? This is your personal shopper too? So just to repeat, this isn't just an app. This is your tool to keep America great. Join the army for Trump and download the app today.
Trump campaign is now reaching voters online.
You are seeing the President of the United States. Look at the lines.
You joined our movement.
A lot of President Trump supporters here.
Greatest movement in the history of our country. I'm fighting for you, and I love doing it with everything that I have. And I will never, ever stop. We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will make America great again.
Welcome to Team Trump Online.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Veterans for Trump online battle brief. Thank you for joining us. I'm Katrina Pierson, Senior Advisor to President Trump's re-election campaign, and tonight we have three amazing veterans who are still serving our nation out of uniform. First, the highest-ranking combat veteran ever elected to Congress, representing Michigan's 1st District, retired Marine General Jack Bergman. And representing the 2nd District from the great state of Texas, former Navy SEAL Congressman Dan Crenshaw. And finally, one of our brave patriots from the famed Benghazi Annex Security Team, former Marine Corps Sergeant John Tig Tigan, who is also a Veterans for Trump Coalition Advisory Board member. Gentlemen, we thank you for your service and thanks for joining the battle brief. Tonight, we'll be talking about the president's support for our military, improved health care for our veterans, the strength and fortitude of our country, and how the national security threat of a faint-hearted former commander-in-chief through his vice president, Joe Biden, would simply be an extension of Democrats' failed leadership. So let's dive in. Since taking office, the president has recoupled U.S. foreign policy to domestic politics, a bond that has become increasingly frayed over the recent decades. Congressman Bergman, will you please share with us a little bit about your military experience and what you've seen accomplished under the Trump administration?
Hey, thanks, Katrina, and I'm excited for this panel tonight because I know the people on the other screens, and it's a great group. You're going to get it just like it was meant to be said. I guarantee you that. 40 years in a Marine Corps uniform. Roughly 20 years active duty, 20 years reserve intermix. Started as a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, came back, and then commanded at all levels and was in command of the Marine Corps Reserve in New Orleans in 2005 when then Hurricane Katrina showed up. And we can talk a little bit about failure of state leadership at that point based on my experience. And now I'm proud to be a retired Marine and representative of the 1st District.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for your service. Congressman Crenshaw, same question, your experience and what you've seen.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Katrina and General Bergman. You know, I just want to point out, I have a quarter of the military career that he had, serving in Vietnam for 40 years. I did 10 years in the SEAL teams. And, you know, I fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I want to say this, how America has I think, changed and reformed over time. Back before my time, when Vietnam veterans were coming home and not being treated well, not being given the kind of equipment, the life-saving equipment that we have now to go into battle with. And I will say that one thing that does give me hope is how America treats its veterans nowadays. And whether you like hearing "thank you for your service" or not, I think you should like it. The fact is that people try to say it and people try to reach out, and I think that's a great thing. I'm proud to see us pass the Mission Act a couple of years ago, and as we watch that get implemented, hopefully we start to see veterans get more choice over their health care and an improved experience with the VA.
Now, Tig, you come at this from a different perspective. What is your experience like, and what have you seen with regards to life improving for veterans?
Well, myself, I'm a 40% disabled veteran. My wife, she's a 30% disabled veteran. And right now, the biggest difference that we've seen is just, I guess, the accountability that some of the VA facilities have actually had to be held to. My wife, she was having a big problem with the VA facility down in Pueblo with one of her doctors, and she was reporting the doctor several times. Nothing would ever happen. She kept being stuck with the same doctor. And then when Trump started pushing pretty much, can't even think of the word now. When throwing a Biden out there for me. When Trump started making the VA pretty much reliable for the decisions and be able to make accountable is what I'm looking for, the word accountable. The wife made a final report, and they actually left her from that doctor. She got moved from that doctor, actually, and she was able to choose another VA facility completely, which she moved up to Colorado Springs. And that's been night and day just for her alone. So we see that improvement. There are some other things that have actually also improved from the veterans that we've helped with our foundation with the mental health aspect, where veterans are now able to get better care outside the VA, and the VA is actually covering those mental health issues. But one of the things that a lot of the veterans are not seeking the mental health for, which I think hopefully will get corrected, is the mental health and guns relation. If a veteran goes in and has a mental issue, they almost automatically take away his Second Amendment rights to be able to purchase a gun or get a gun. And we've had several veterans that we know personally that happened to, and they're mentally stable. We actually have a couple that come out here, and I still let them shoot at my range because they can't have guns, so I let them use mine. And I think that's just one aspect that needs to be fixed. But overall, I see personally myself also that my doctor's a lot better, and I can choose where I want to go and what I want to be seen for. So there is a lot more improvement since Trump took office and put them accountable for their actions.
Well, and that's the reason why Donald J. Trump needs to be reelected in November, because as you've mentioned, there's still a lot more work that needs to be done. But now to the battle at hand. I'd like to take a moment to capture your thoughts on the president's efforts to protect the American people from the hidden enemy, coronavirus. Congressman Bergman, with regard to the health and economic security of all Americans, can you tell us about the latest Paycheck Protection Program that was passed just last week in Congress?
Well, I can, but let me preface it by saying, this isn't the first effort that President Trump has made to protect the veterans. And protect all of us as Americans, for that matter. In fact, as Dan mentioned, the VA Mission Act and the VA Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act and the Forever GI Bill and the Improve Act, which is about veteran suicide, so many of those veterans who are outside of the VA system. President Trump and Secretary Wilkie have just been really doing it right to make sure we get the word out to the veterans. Now transition to the Paycheck Protection Act, and that's really never easy for me to say. It's just not one of those things that rolls off your tongue. The point is, we have veteran small business owners. We have all sorts of folks who this plan was meant to help get through this tough economic time. So when we get back to work, they're ready to get back to work. $310 billion last week was added to the pot of money, which that could have been added a couple of weeks ago had the other side, that would be the House leadership of the DNC, and that's Do Nothing Congress. The point is, We could have done this 2 weeks earlier, but we were playing politics. The idea, money in the plan, 90% of the loans are the small businesses, now focusing on small farmers. This is meant to put money in the pockets of Americans so when we can reopen for business, we're ready to reopen for business. And President Trump and mobilizing all of the people that he has on his staff and throughout industry has made the difference and built the confidence that I see here in my district every day.
That's fantastic. You know, the president has been working day in and day out for the American people. And, you know, part of the issues that many of our supporters, including the president, his family members, have to deal with is the media. There's a pop culture out there that helps the media essentially gaslight the public. Congressman Crenshaw, your interview with Bill Maher went viral last week, and it highlighted some key facts that Joe Biden and the media simply ignore with regard to the president's response to the pandemic. Would you mind providing our viewers a little recap of that discussion?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of details to that discussion. When you have this debate, you need to have the evidence on your side, and there's a lot of evidence to be had. So you'll have to look up those videos that the president tweeted out and my interview with the Bill Maher show to get a better idea of that. But I will leave you with a couple of things. If somebody is trying to claim that this administration completely failed to be prepared or to take action properly, simply ask that person a question. Where's the fork in the road? At what point in time would another administration very clearly and obviously done something totally different? Okay, and why? And is that objectively true? There is no other time except for one, January 31st, when President Trump restricted travel from China. Okay, that is one case where we know for a fact that Democrats would have done something totally different and thousands of people would have died as a result. Can't forget that. Now, they can claim that, oh, well, thousands of Chinese people still got into the U.S. after that. It wasn't really a travel restriction. That's nonsense. You know who those 40,000 people were? U.S. citizens, green card holders, passport holders, people being repatriated. So Democrats are, first of all, didn't want the restriction in the first place. Now they're saying it wasn't really a restriction and it should have been a tighter control. So they're also saying that they would not allow U.S. citizens back into the country. These people are all over the place, and you got to know the facts in order to call them out because they are sneaky and they will lie through their teeth. They're doing it all the time. But if you have the facts, you can actually fight back.
That's absolutely right. And that's the purpose of many of our coalitions, to make sure that people have the facts so that they can, you know, in their communities, communicate to everyone what's really happening, because they're not going to get it from the mainstream media. With that, stay right there. We'll take a short break. And when we come back, we'll talk more about the strength of America and her fighting spirit. Welcome back to Veterans for Trump Online Battle Brief. I'm Katrina Pierson, joined by Congressman Bergman and Crenshaw, along with Benghazi hero Tig Tigan. President Trump reminds us every night during his televised press conferences of the strength, resilience, and fortitude of our nation's citizens, and our history has shown that Americans always find a way to rise to the challenge, overcome adversity, and emerge stronger than ever before. Congressman Crenshaw, Joe Biden expressed excitement about our nation's crisis. In fact, he sees it as an opportunity to make changes that would benefit the Democrats' big government socialist agenda. Aside from that nonsense, we've seen some of the president's fiercest critics praising his handling of the pandemic, and the president has returned praise in kind. Do you think that examples like this and other actions set the stage for America to emerge from this pandemic stronger and more unified than ever?
I would hope so. What you have seen is a lot of political opportunism. And I wrote about this weeks ago when whether it was the decision about reopening the economy or keeping it shut down, or whose fault it is for the pandemic. I mean, that political opportunism has reared its ugly head. And as you noted, some people have even taken it a step further and said, because of this crisis, their radical agenda should be implemented. And that's obviously the wrong way to think about it. We should be in problem-solving mode and figuring out how to work together to get to a common goal, which is the goal of getting back to normalcy. That should obviously be our goal: get people their jobs back and get some cash back in people's pockets and get the economy up and running. That's what we have to be about. And I think it's great that a lot of governors are working well with the president, as you've noted. Even places, there's even public praise being thrown out there by governors of California and New York. It just goes to show that the president is the president of the entire country, and in a time of crisis, there's just no space for this kind of opportunism, and we have to call it out when we see it, and then follow it up with talking about how we really are all in this together. And it's up to all Americans to be part of the solution, not part of the problem, to live with duty and to live with that fortitude.
And speaking of calling it out, Congressman Bergman, your state of Michigan has been in the news lately because your governor, like many elected Democrats, have severely overreached and abused their power with the stay-at-home orders. You have been quite outspoken in your criticism of Governor Whitmer, and the people of the Republic of Michigan are responding as well, as we see in many states across the country. Like President Trump, you feel that it is imperative that we balance safety with the reopening of our economy. What is your take on the fighting spirit of the American people?
Well, I want to piggyback a little bit on what Congressman Crenshaw said a minute ago. I felt like I was listening to my mother from the standpoint, she used to say, you're either part of the solution or part of the problem. Okay. And I would suggest to you that when you were elected as anything other than a governor or a president, all you are is somebody who's somewhere in the system. You're not leading anything. Joe Biden has been part of the problem for so long, I don't think he even knows what the solutions would look like. And when you get elected as one of those 51 commanders-in-chief, President Trump being the #1 commander-in-chief and the 50 governors being the other commanders-in-chief of their states, just because someone gets elected doesn't mean they're a leader. We've seen that here in Michigan because we have a perfectly fine human being who got elected, but the bottom line is has not surrounded herself with consistent, experienced advisors under her leadership. I hope she realizes that Michigan has two peninsulas, both the upper and the lower, and you don't send all your resources to one edge of your entire battlefield. We saw that in the budget cuts about a year ago, where she basically threw the entire upper peninsula and the upper third of lower Michigan under the bus. We as American people know we will always do the right thing for the right reason at the right time, and it's because we have faith. Faith in ourselves, faith in others, and quite honestly, faith in God. We need more faith, and we need more people who actually have leadership roles in their past, like President Trump, who's led businesses, who's done all of this, and comes into this in just a different governing leadership way.
You know, you're right. And I think the American public is recognizing that simple fact and will pay closer attention in future elections. Now, Tig, you are the embodiment of no quit. How do you think we'll come back stronger than ever before once the threat of this virus passes?
Yeah, I think this was a huge wake-up call. People, they wanted to make fun of all the doomsday preppers. But this pandemic came out. I mean, it was almost kind of like a fear mongering from the media, and people went out, started panic buying. Pretty much devastated the grocery stores, which, for this toilet paper thing, I have no idea. But I think it was a wake-up call, a way we're going to come back stronger. I mean, they showed how much we relied on foreign countries for our pharmaceuticals and medical supplies and pretty much the manufacturing. So hopefully this is, again, it'll come back. We'll start doing it more here, actually, in our country, start producing ourselves. For China, they're threatening to cut it off. So I think that's how we're going to come back stronger. People are going to wake up. They're actually going to prepare themselves a lot better for any other catastrophe that's going to happen, versus a hurricane, tornado, or whatever. I know a lot of this stuff only happens usually with hurricanes on the East Coast and, tornadoes through Texas, Oklahoma. I think it just really was a huge wake-up call, and that way people will be more prepared for situations like this, along with our government. I mean, usually we learn from tragedies, unfortunately. And so I think all across the board is a big wake-up call on how ill-prepared we were for a lot of things.
Yeah, the American public is usually just living in their own world, working, taking care of their children. And I think this is really highlighted, to your point, a lot of things that we've just taken for granted. Now, Congressman Bergman, we see President Trump making some very tough decisions and fighting for the American public. How can we come together as Americans for the president during this time?
Well, number one, first and foremost, treat everyone with dignity and respect. Listen, value others, but value what you see as true leadership. Don't get caught up in the media moments that are trying to maybe take your focus off on what is real. And what is real, what I've seen, is President Trump's unrelenting, focused, never quit leadership style. We all have different leadership style, but I tell you what, I've had some great leaders to follow over the course of my career. And the idea is that we, as you talked about, Tig, there's no quit. There's no quit in the president. There's no quit in any of us on this video call. That's how we succeed, is not quitting on each other. That will take us through.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, and I think a lot of families have reconnected over this also, and again highlighting things that we've taken for granted for a very long time. Congressman Crenshaw, unity is something that you speak of quite often. How can Americans see the good in each other despite disagreeing so deeply through political lines?
Yeah, we need to find more things that we share as Americans, and we can all be part of this solution. So, one thing that worries me a great deal is everything has gotten politicized. Politics has started to infest every single aspect of our lives, from pop culture to Hollywood to comedy to music. It's ripping us apart, but we don't have to let it, okay? We don't have to click on that emotional headline. We don't have to give the media and these social media companies the incentives, the financial incentives that they use to make us all outraged and mad at each other. We can stop and we can think about that headline. We can look into it more. And most of all, encourage your Democrat friends to look into it more. Say, hey, do you really think that the president actually means this, or do you think maybe that's what the media wants you to think that he means? Do you really think that he's this evil person? Do you really think that the other side is truly bad people? Of course not. Of course not. We have slightly different ways of looking at things, and encourage people to dig a few layers deep. Remember that a lot of our goals are the same. We might just have different ways of going of finding those solutions, and remind people to, again, be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Live with the sense of duty going forward, making sure you're washing your hands correctly. Put your shopping cart back so the clerks at the grocery store don't have to. The little things really matter now, especially as we try to get out of this crisis.
Well, you're absolutely right. Even though we may disagree vehemently on political policies, we all have to live in this country together. So thank you all for reminding us of the strength and courage of the people of our nation. So sit tight, we'll take a short break, and when we return, we will talk about the importance of re-electing a tough commander-in-chief. Welcome back to Veterans for Trump Online Battle Brief. I'm Katrina Pierson, back with Patriots Congressman Bergman and Crenshaw and Benghazi hero Tig. Final comments, gentlemen. When we look at the beginning stages of the COVID-19 outbreak, the president's decisive leadership and early actions was met with criticism and censure. In spite of all that, The president remains aggressive in taking action for the American people, but that doesn't stop the media from gaslighting the public and the Democrats from piling on. As combat veterans under previous administrations, you have experienced life-threatening moments and dangerous situations, so you know deeply the importance of a fighting spirit and taking aggressive, decisive actions versus the dangers of a weak, faint-hearted commander-in-chief like we've seen before. Tig, you were in Benghazi. On that day, September 11th, 2011, you experienced firsthand the detrimental effect of indecisive and weak decision-making or even absent leadership. Would you share your thoughts about that day under the Obama-Biden administration versus the way President Trump leads today?
Well, I mean, just their decision-making for that night, just for the fact of sending the Marines in, either in uniform or out of uniform, if they knew anything about the local populace in Libya, or especially in Benghazi, they don't know that actually they were honored the fact that we were actually there. I mean, we had first time anywhere in a Muslim country that I've been where they'd walk across the street and shake my hand and want to shake my hand and say it's an honor to meet an American, or they would buy us lunch or coffee when they saw us. Just the leadership under Biden, in my opinion, what it would look like would be, the fact that bin Laden himself wanted to assassinate Obama so Biden could be president. That says a lot right there, in my opinion. It's just, at least now under Trump, we have a president who's taken the offense versus the defense. With the Iran incident recently, them harassing our Navy ships for years. I mean, under Obama and Biden, they took some Navy guys prisoner in international waters without pretty much any repercussion, but gave them $1 billion in cash or something. So, and now the president's saying, no, if they come and harass us, we engage them, which I think is a good thing, because the previous administration was just nothing but weakness across the board, drawing red lines. People would cross the red line, then nothing would happen to them. So I think under, at least Trump's putting America first, or I think he's going to save more American lives, more troop lives. The rules of engagement changed being president, where before it just risked our boys and girls over there because, a guy would engage you, he dropped the gun, you couldn't engage back. Now it's like they engage you, you can continue the engagement until the threat's completely eliminated, which is how it should be. So I think under Trump, it's a lot stronger and it's a more aggressive, and it's going to make us a lot safer all around.
Yeah, it seems like it's the difference between offense or just staying on defense. And Congressman Crenshaw, you have been on the knife's edge of foreign policy, fighting on some of the most famed battlefields of our time, Fallujah, Iraq, Afghanistan. How important is it that a commander-in-chief gives clear guidance and leads from the front?
Yeah, it's exceptionally clear, important, and that we have a commander-in-chief that does that. As soon as Trump took office, there was a clear sea change in how the fight against ISIS in particular was being conducted, and it was just as described here a minute ago, where the gloves were taken off and you allow military leaders to actually win. The military can win if you let it. And that's extremely important. Another great dichotomy that we see was just recently when President Trump said that any of the Iranian U.S. Navy vessels harassing U.S. ships in the Persian Gulf will be shot down, as he said. Well, that's a huge difference from before, when our sailors would actually be boarded. Their ships would be boarded and taken prisoner, at least temporarily, by the Iranian Navy. I mean, when we saw that happen, when we saw the shame that was incurred on our country, a superpower, being embarrassed publicly by a Navy that really is just full of fishing boats. That's basically what the Iranian Navy is. And under that administration, because the rules of engagement were so unclear, because their will to act like a superpower was so degraded, we actually let that happen. And that may seem superficial to some who don't understand foreign policy, but it's important. These images matter a great deal. They matter for our deterrence. They matter for our international relations. They matter for global security. And listen, as a country, we do have to remember that we live in a very small world. It doesn't take months to cross the ocean as it did just a couple hundred years ago. It takes 12 hours to get from here to the Middle East. 12 hours. Information travels even faster. So the U.S. military is the one thing that guarantees peace across the globe, and we can't forget that.
You're absolutely right. And, leading in from that, General Bergman, you hear all of these things under the previous administration, whether it be, giving money to, state sponsors of terror and being weak and not making decisions, and, Americans being hurt and no reaction. You see drawing red lines with no response, zero consequences. When you see that under the previous administration, Joe Biden is simply an extension of that weakness. What are your comments on that?
Well, number one, what would I see in a Biden presidency? Unprecedented before. We saw it under President Obama, but the indecisiveness, the ability or lack of ability to make a decision, that's what drove the last administration. And it was largely because they let it be driven by unelected bureaucrats, pure and simple. So when you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And that's what we've seen in the last administration. That's what we would see in a Biden administration. And as Tig and Dan both mentioned, and you did too, about offense versus defense, you win games by playing offense. President Trump has been playing offense because we've been playing defense too long. And guess what? When you're on offense, you got the ball. And if you're on defense, because I've played all sorts of sports, and football being one of my favorites, offense and defense, what's the goal on defense? Get the ball back. President Trump's got the ball, and people are trying to rip it out of his hands every day. And guess what? He's holding on tight, and he's leading with a clear head.
That's right. He sure is, General. One last question for you. You recently said, in any situation, the worst thing to do is to lose control. What do you mean by that?
Lose control means lose your patience, and the way you lose your patience is by not staying current with what's going on the battlefield, if you will. And I tell you what, one of the things that I see in the president is that he stays in touch. He's always on the phone. He's always talking to somebody, whether it be in the government, in the industry. He knows what's going on. And good, actionable battlefield intel is what drives the day. Don't be indecisive. Don't wait for someone to tell you what's going on. Make things happen yourself.
And that is exactly what President Trump has been doing since the day he was elected. Thank you so much, Congressman Bergman and Crenshaw, and thank you, Tig, for joining us this evening. We value your thoughts and experiences, proving that we have a continued need for a strong commander-in-chief. Thanks to everyone for watching. And please look for future online battle briefs from Veterans for Trump and stay connected by going to veterans.donaldjtrump.com. Follow us on Twitter at Veterans4DJT and on Facebook and Instagram at Veterans for Trump 20. To join this coalition, text FIGHT to 88022. And if you want to stay connected to the campaign, be sure to text Trump to 88022. You can now download our brand new Trump 2020 app from the App Store on iPhone and Android, where you can sign up to volunteer, register for online events, and make voter contact phone calls, while you can also win exclusive prizes. Thanks again to our special guests, and thank you for tuning in tonight. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.